Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories. Hello and welcome back to Crazy Missionary Stories. Today we have Oren Green with us, and a little bit about him. He is the dad of one of our past guests, Sandy Britnell. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back. It's episode 3. It's really good, so go back and listen to that. Before listening to this, it might help clear a little bit up. So we're going to hear a little bit from her dad today, who was serving in Colombia for 19 years. So will you tell us what you were doing in Colombia as a missionary and as a field director?
I graduated from Prayer Bible Institute, and we were exposed to a lot of different needs on mission fields around the world, actually, because representatives from all these different countries would come and speak to us and try to challenge us to go to their country and serve because the need was so great. And so had a lot of different countries on the list that we were looking at. I'm a little fuzzy on the details about how we ended up choosing Colombia. I think it was because our mission that we were members of kept pushing Colombia. It was a brand new field, just opened, nobody there.
What year would that be?
Oh no.
What year did you graduate?
I was afraid that was.
That's okay.
What year did you graduate from Prairie, Dad?
I don't even remember that.
Well, I was like 10, I think, or 11.
Well, you could get pretty close to that.
So I was born in 51, so it probably was early 60s.
1962 seems to stick in my mind. Next question.
Well, just 1 minute, Dad. Remember you had originally thought about going to New Guinea?
I did.
Don
Had a good friend
his
that was in New Guinea, and
Your good friend that might be known by a few people. What was his name?
his name was what was his name?
Don Richardson.
Don Richardson, and he kept challenging me, of course, to go to New Guinea. It's a good place. They need missionaries, and we had just decided, well, that's where we're going to go. Until the mission said we have a urgent need in Colombia. It's a new field. We need older missionaries to go to establish a work there. Somebody they liked the fact that I was already in my 30s and with
5 kids.
5 children.
Wow. That didn't scare them at all, huh?
Well, he originally wanted to go with Don's mission, which is Regions Beyond Missionary Union.
Okay.
But they had a rule, I think, that you could only have 3 children.
Actually, most missions did in those days. You couldn't go to the field with over 2 children.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that.
What they really wanted was single missionaries, and then a married missionary was next, and then if you had 2 kids, then that's it. That's all you could have.
And we already had 5. So
And that
we were
was across the board with mission agencies back in that day, in the 60s.
well, not new tribes,
Not new tribes.
which is why we ended up there.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah,
so-
that's a good point. New Tribes Mission was the only one that would accept us because we had too many children.
We couldn't get rid of the extra ones. I was tempted. We weren't giving them. We weren't throwing them back.
So in the 60s, you left the United States to go to Colombia to work in the tribes.
Right.
What was that like when you first went? Do you remember when you first went into Colombia?
Do you know the name Sophie Mueller?
Yeah.
I talked about her a bit.
Yeah, Sandy talked about her.
She was a single missionary. She had gone to Colombia like 4 or 5 years before we did, and she had established a work there, right along the Venezuelan border in the very deep interior. And she was asking for help for our mission leaders to send her help. And so we were we were in the training at the time, and so they asked 3 families to go, and the other 2 turned it down. They said, "Nope, I don't want to work with
Sophie Mueller.
with Sophie."
Really?
She had
Bad
a,
rep.
quite a reputation at that time, and we accepted that and went. And I think we would have been the second family to go in there with New Church Mission. So we went right straight into the jungle.
From Bogota, we flew to Bogota, and then I think we were there for like 3 weeks. No language school, but we were there for 3 weeks, and then got on the truck with our onions and potatoes and and chickens, yeah, and the truck drove us to the Orinoco River.
So do you remember back then having any type of fear bringing your 5 kids to this place where there weren't a lot of missionaries? And I imagine you didn't know too much about where you were going.
I think the Lord protected me from a lot of that. If you don't really know, then it's hard to be afraid.
Yeah, true.
So we'd heard all kinds of stories. I think if I analyze what my bottom feeling was with that, that we feel like, Lord, what you've called us to do this, and you're going to take care of us.
Mm.
And I think that's what kept us going.
Well, one brother got, when we were driving in the truck for 3 days across the lowlands, the savannah, it wasn't jungle, it was just flat, or well, whatever. But anyway, he got really bad malaria. And that was do you remember that when Randy got malaria? And then the tribal people said, that's the deadly malaria that you get out there. So
that was the initiation.
yeah, that was, then I
And the
started.
Lord healed him? Or how?
Well, it just worked itself out,
Took time.
Yeah. But that was kind of scary.
So can I ask, were you born into a family of Christians, or how did you come to know Jesus?
No, I didn't grow up in a Christian family. My dad was very strict. There was no monkey business going on. Everybody had to behave and toe the line and do as you're told, and so it was a very strict atmosphere. But we never went to church that I can remember. Then Alma was
Alma's my mom.
a student at Fullerton Junior College, and she was taking a cosmetology course, and I met her. She may have cut my hair or something.
Romantic.
I don't remember the details.
That's what you call a meet cute.
Anyway, oh no, I met her on a blind date. That's what it was.
Oh, wow.
You know what a blind date is?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's how we met, and with her sister and her friend. A friend of mine had dated her sister, and so he said, "You want to go out with this girl?" And I said, "Yeah." So we went out. Actually, was nothing really going on out of the ordinary at that time. We went together a couple times. Now the details are foggy. After that, we must have gone together 6 months or so, and.
But she was a strong Christian. She was raised in.
Yeah, she was that was the point. She was a strong Christian. She was going to church, and so she asked me one out. We were on a date somewhere, and she said, I'm going to church tomorrow, and you get ready, and I'm going to pick you up at 9 o'clock. Or 10 o'clock, or whatever it was.
She was just
Going to church.
Oh, so I'm going to be sleeping at 10 o'clock. Don't bother me. And she would not take no for an answer. I thought, this girl's really weird. She doesn't know what no means. Anyway, I gave in and went to church a few times. Went forward in a meeting once, and everything changed.
My mother just passed. It's like, 2 weeks ago or so, 3 weeks ago. And one of my sisters got all the old slides together, and there's a cutest slide of them on their first first time at church. He had a nice suit on, and she was all dressed up, and
That is so sweet.
I'm sorry for your loss. Yeah.
she was 92. So, and we just celebrated her life. You know, it was like
Yeah.
we're sad, and
Absolutely.
it's hard for him because they've been married. They were married for 73 years.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Testimony in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. You don't hear that a lot.
No,
Mm-hmm.
especially when been through some rough things. Anyway,
Well, can we go back to Colombia? And when you went in, what did you all do in Colombia? What was that like? You went to the tribes. I'm just curious to know. I can just almost, like as a child, remember hearing about people in tribes and just like I have my imagination of what it was like. But what was it really like for you when you went in, and what were you doing? What was the ministry? What was your daily life there?
Well, we we moved into this Indian village actually with another missionary. Had two families living, working on the same base.
Do they live in huts or what?
Indians lived in huts, yeah, but we
Dad,
had,
we lived in a hut.
yeah,
a mud hut,
we lived. Our first house was the
thatch
palm
roof,
roof,
right, and mud floor.
yeah, and mud walls.
Wow.
So, which, we'd been told this is what it was going to be like, and so we were ready for it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a terrible shock.
Do you have a stove inside that you cooked on, that your wife cooked on? Or
We had a Coleman stove,
Two burner.
a little
Camping
camp
stove.
stove, and
camp stove. Okay.
and we had furniture that with a stove and refrigerator that we had sent from the U.S., but it was still en route. Our first few weeks there, the biting gnats were the hardest thing.
Biting gnats. They left
Little
welts,
bite, a little gnats, black, about half the size of a fly, that bite, and they would bring a blood spot where that was hard. So they would, if you went outside with bare skin, they would start batting on bare skin. So
you had to wear
that
long
was
sleeves
really
and-
tough. And then this jungle heat. See, it's high humidity, high temperature, and biting gnats.
And mosquitoes at night. They changed. It was so fun. They changed. I think I mentioned this in my podcast. They changed hands, or the gnats went to bed at like 6, and the mosquitoes came out. Yeah.
They worked in
So it was
shifts.
never. Yeah, that's right. It
Well,
was
at
a shift.
least they took turns.
That was nice of them, huh?
So you had to wear long sleeves. If you had shirt, long sleeves, and couldn't wear a dress.
Do you have to wear socks?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The other
If
challenge
you
was
didn't, they'd bite your ankles.
the chiggers. Remember, Dad, the little
Chiggers.
the little red.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were.
But I mean, I think we were happy
I'm
to.
sure you're overwhelmed for them. We had flies, mosquitoes, and biting gnats and chiggers.
And then not to mention the snakes and other wild animals.
Yeah. Sounds very adventurous.
Well, as a child, we thought it was great, but I think as parents, that was probably a little intimidating.
We talk about going and adapting to culture. You're just talking about adapting to living in a place where you're being eaten all day and all night to start out.
Well, if you stayed inside, you could spray around and kill all the bugs in the house, and you could escape from them if you stayed inside.
But the idea was to get out there and mingle with the Indians.
Year-round. So when you first went then, this Sophie Mueller,
Yeah.
she had already made all of the contacts, is
Yeah.
that right? And so there were people who knew the Lord.
Well, they were professing Christians. We'll put it that way. We're not really sure.
And then so you went, and your job was to do what?
Was to teach.
Mostly leadership training, right?
Leadership training and holding meetings to teach the Bible to Stone Age people. And this was, since I didn't speak their language, I spoke Spanish, and they usually had somebody that understood Spanish in the village. And so I had to find that person and get him to interpret for me. So this is the way we got started. So I I would prepare a simple Bible lesson and then get the interpreter and get everybody together, and they would sit there for a solid hour if you'd teach.
Wow.
They didn't mind. They weren't restless like we are.
Yeah. Wow.
Not looking at their watches.
But anyway, that was the beginning, and then so that there were villages all over that had something like maybe 30 to 40 people in a village, maybe bigger. I can't remember exactly, but the village couldn't get too big because of the land. You know, they had to have gardens to live on, so they kept the number of the villages down to like 30 to 40 people was ideal. And then, so I would go to those different places and spend a week or 2 weeks and teach and keep moving.
And the cool thing about that was, Mom stayed. We stayed pretty local. You know, she stayed with us, and he was free to travel with the tribal people and do these. Well, we did a lot of conferences. Remember, Dad?
Yeah.
And then lots of people would come to the conference, and then the last day we would baptize. Remember?
Wow.
Yeah, that was already set up when we got there that they would get together once a year for a conference with like maybe 6 or 7 different villages would come to one and have like some kind of a celebration. They traveled by water mostly, and they would all speak the same language, so this would be confined to that language group. So that's the way it got started.
So the tribe that you guys, or the village that you guys kind of stayed put in, what was the name of that? What were they called?
Puinave.
Have you heard that word?
Only from Sandy. I haven't heard it elsewhere.
But Dad, remember, I remember going to a conference with you because I was doing high school by homeschool, so I was stayed. Some of the other siblings went to boarding school in Venezuela. But do you remember when you had to have several translators, where you spoke in Spanish and then the Puinave and then the Guayabero and then the Guajibo and whatever, it just went.
Yeah, that really wasn't ideal. Yeah, you get different groups that have come together. Then you need a translator for each group. So sometimes there'd be as many as 3 interpreters standing on the platform with me, and I would speak, and then the first one would explain it to his people. Number 2 would explain it to his people. Number 3, and so on.
So you were speaking in Spanish,
I
and they were
was
translating from
speaking in
Spanish to
yeah.
their tribal language,
Yeah.
the direct tribal language. Incredible. How many people would you have at a meeting like that then, if you had three different languages represented?
Maybe 100. I'm not sure.
Or more, Dad, because I remember one of those conferences, we baptized 64 people. Wow. Remember that? And we had the catchers downstream.
No, I don't remember that.
I covered that in mine.
Yeah, the dangerous baptisms.
We may never see you again, but you have been baptized.
So we changed a lot of that pretty quickly. We started training people from each one of those groups. We take a Christian and ask him if he would be an interpreter to interpret from Spanish to his language, and we would teach him a lot of what he had to pass on to his people. So we changed a lot of things the first couple of years we were there.
So when you went there, they kind of had the gospel already, but what was their main religion? Did they have one, or?
They had religions, but they wouldn't talk about it. So we never really learned much about
Well,
that.
I think it was a lot of witchcraft too.
Yeah, it was. That's why it was. Witchcraft was mingled in with it. So they discovered right away that that's not going to fit the gospel message and
Dad, do you remember in a couple of the villages that we did the conferences, when they came to the Lord, they went back to their homes and gathered up all the witchcraft stuff that they, whatever they were using for witchcraft, and built a big fire in the middle of the village and burnt all the witchcraft. And the Colombian nationals would buy their stuff, so they would buy it and give the Indians money for it, and so they were losing money by burning that, but that was their statement of faith. We're turning our back on that, and we're going toward the Lord. And pretty exciting. You might not have remembered that, but I was very impacted by that commitment.
I'm curious, if witchcraft was so strong, I imagine you came across a lot of spiritual warfare in what you were doing. Do you have any memories of anything in particular that you remember, or the struggles?
Well, there were a lot of things that happened that we were suspicious that it was an evil spirit, but never really knew for sure.
What kind of things would happen to make you suspect that?
Well, mostly stories that the Indians would tell us, like things moved that were inanimate things that would scare the life out of them,
Yeah, we saw quite a bit of evidence.
I just gave you a little bit of what happened when we first arrived.
Yeah.
Then the field grew and we began to branch out into a number of different tribes, probably 8 or 9. We had teams in there. Then transportation was a big problem. And so we bought this little Cessna 185, and the mission now has a flight department, and they sent us a pilot, and this pilot's name was Paul Dye, that I'm going to tell a story about.
His parents were missionaries too. His dad was killed. It was a group of 5, but not the same saint, not the saint group. It was another 5 that a new tribes group, and his dad was killed by the tribal people in, was that Ecuador? That Paul Dye's dad? Those 5 guys?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, go ahead, Dad. Sorry.
Anyway, this pilot was on a routine flight and took, I think the missionary and his wife flew into his station there on the river, deep in the jungle. He was there, and the plane was parked there, and the missionary got off the plane with his wife and supplies, and at that point, people came out of the jungle and held guns on the pilot and said, "Okay, get in, we'll tell you where to go." He takes off and flies over jungle, and they're telling him where to go, and he lands on a remote airstrip right out in the middle of the jungle. So they're holding a gun on him all this time.
Do you think he knew where he was when they made him land?
Well, he knew approximately where he was.
Okay.
We didn't have anybody working in that area.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, they've got him now, and they had an armed guard on him 24 hours a day. So he has a key to the plane and a shoe.
An extra key.
In his shoe.
That they took everything else away. Didn't know he had that key. So he's got an armed guard there watching him 24 hours a day, and he had this all planned. If he had an opportunity, if this guy goes to sleep, I'm going to try to get away.
So how long was he held captive?
It was days.
Yeah.
Don't you think, Dad?
I'm going to guess maybe 2 weeks before
So
he
the
was sick.
guerrillas there had him held hostage for about 2 weeks.
They wanted that plane,
Oh, okay.
and they wanted to use him to transport the people around.
Or the drugs around. Yeah.
And anyway, the armed guard finally goes to sleep about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, sitting in a chair. So he gets up, puts his clothes on, and goes out to where they had parked the plane, which was off the runway. And they had put these big long palm leaves over the plane to hide it, so if you flew over there, you wouldn't see it. So I had to take those all off and then turn the plane around, which that wasn't a huge thing. He could pick up the tail of it pretty easily and turn it around. And so he gets in, he has to go out on the airstrip and then turn to take off. So he starts it up and roars as fast as it'd go out onto the airstrip. Gets stuck. One wheel gets stuck on the way out.
Oh no.
Said he had to go 3 times. Finally got out of
Oh my word!
that thing
I didn't know that.
and went out and on on the airstrip and then took off in the middle of the night.
That guard had to have woken up the very first time he started the
that's
mission.
Right. So they were shooting at him, right, when he was taking off.
I think so.
He said, he told Jim and I, or Doug and I guess, that they were shooting at him on the ground, shooting the plane.
So he was able to escape in this plane, and then what? I mean,
Yeah, that's a
good
good question. Now he's flying back to the city of Villavicencio, which is in the foothills.
but did he know where he was?
Oh yeah, well he has maps and he knew approximately where he was.
Wow.
So they got north and south and they know, and he was fairly familiar with the terrain.
But we're saying 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
So it was dark.
It's dark, but he's flying toward his destination, and he gets about a half an hour from the airport and runs out of gas.
Oh no.
So it lands in a cow pasture. I think it was dawn by that time, so he could see. Well, he lands it safely, no problem. As he was approaching this, getting ready to land, he called a Wycliffe base, which was not far away. Wycliffe has a flight department, and and he was familiar with all those guys. He told them what had happened, and they said, "Bring me some gas." And they flew one of their planes out immediately and landed where he did and gave him the gas, and he then flew on home.
Wow.
And that's the story.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it became increasingly dangerous. When the drugs people started taking over,
Yeah.
they actually killed. Was it Chet Bitterman? Yeah, he was the equivalent of Dad, but with Wycliffe.
So field director.
Field director. And so a couple days later, jump in, Dad, if you remember this. A couple days later, FARC, which is the name of the organization, it was a terrorist organization, but they were trying to raise money so they could run for politics. Two of their Jeeps showed up at our front door in Bogota. And then they had a spray painted an arrow with FARC on the pavement, and they started pounding on our door. I wasn't there, but Mom told me, and they said Don Orlando, and Mom said no, he's not here, no está. So they went back to their Jeeps and just sat in there out in front of the house. But Dad had gone down to rotisserie chicken place. And apparently he got there a little late, so they had to put the chicken on and roast it.
So literally they were cooking the chicken for you. They probably had to kill it and then cook the chicken.
Right,
Huh?
that's right. But Mom went up, the roofs were all flat, because that's where you hung your clothes out and, had a garden up there, whatever. Mom went up to the roof to try to catch him before he turned the corner. And she said she aged 10 years up there. So she didn't see him. And so they finally pulled away just at the same time that Dad turned the corner and toward the house.
Wow.
Do you remember that, Dad? Okay.
He was just focused on the chicken.
Wow. That chicken saved your life.
That's right. That was a
Wow.
heroic chicken.
Wow.
Yeah, it got so bad that New Tribes pulled all the new missionaries out,
Did they? Okay.
and that's when they left too.
That would have been in the 80s then?
Mm-hmm.
So as field director then, so as a working with the tribal people, you were teaching leadership and Bible and during seminars, conferences. As the field director, what did that entail?
Well, I was supposed to encourage people that were discouraged
He did a lot of counseling, couples.
and help people. 2 missionaries couldn't get along, like your coworker problems. I was supposed to resolve those. Big job.
You spent a lot of time working with the missionaries.
Yeah.
Eventually, he started out with a tribe, but then there was like 100 missionaries there. So coordinating where they were going to move and, you know,
A lot of
logistics.
what I did was each country had what they called field conferences.
Field conference, yeah.
So I went to those, and I would teach on family relationships and husband-wife relationships, discouragement, depression, suicidal problems. I would teach on that, and then and then see people individually that wanted to see me personally, and that was my role during these conferences.
So you're saying you had missionaries who were suicidal and depressed?
Not very often. Most of them wouldn't admit it if
They were.
But that was your job, to minister to the missionaries, basically.
Yeah,
You did member care.
So I hope this is making sense.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Been involved in so many problems as a field director that I didn't have the slightest idea how to respond to.
Yeah.
So was with that background that I asked if I could go to seminary and study to be a counselor, and they reluctantly said yes.
So you came back to the
I
United
went
States?
to Great Seminary then,
Okay.
and was there for a whole year.
A year.
That was a
Year and a half.
master's level program, so it took a long time. So then went back, and then I began to travel to all the fields.
Okay.
Different countries. And at one point, New Tribes had a big base in Missouri. Like, it was their language school, right? The Camdenton.
Right.
And then they built a medical center, and he had a wing, a counseling wing. So people would come to the language school. There was apartments and stuff, and then they would spend some time with Dad in counseling.
We spent our last years there, and Alma worked as a secretary for me. We had at the end we had 3 of us that were doing that.
Does any story come to mind about when you did a counseling session with somebody that really just impacted what they were doing, how it changed them, or just a difficult situation they were in that you were able to really help them work through to keep them on the field or help them go back out?
You know, missioners don't talk much about that, so
What could you say to encourage them to, if they are feeling depressed or they're struggling with something, how can you encourage them to talk to somebody about it? Because it is probably a little bit of like embarrassing because they are a missionary. They're supposed to be like this higher, person.
not supposed to be depressed.
Right, right. In their head, yeah. So what could you say to encourage somebody?
Well, just because you're a missionary doesn't mean that you're not subject to all these other problems that everybody else has. You've got the same chemicals going on inside you as they do, and you've got if you're too proud to go see a counselor, then you've got another problem.
True.
Yeah, add that to the
And so we need to talk about that one first.
But living in a tribe with just daily survival being so strange. I mean, we had to carry water. First year or so we were down there, carry buckets of water to cook or do, we washed it in the creek, but it's just a very grinding,
Difficult.
And sometimes you just lose track of the vision. We're here to evangelize, but we spent so much time just living and surviving. And Dad spent a lot of time improving our living conditions. Eventually we had a house with a tin roof, and he created the gutters that went into buckets or big, the big collecting rainwater, and then he hooked up a faucet, and we had running water in the kitchen.
Oh my goodness.
So it was, the tribal people never came in our house, but they were always at the window, like, what are the gringos doing now?
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah, I imagine just hearing your story about just as you first arrived, you're being eaten by the gnats, the mosquitoes, the chiggers. I mean, it sounds like torture, actually, you know?
Daily life. Yeah.
Yeah, daily life. And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's not even cooking or getting food.
I just remember, I don't know if you remember this because it might not have affected you, but we were always hungry. You know, I mean, a lot of kids, I mean, I talked to Jim about this, and he said they were hungry all the time, too, and he was raised in the States. But we couldn't find enough to eat, and sometimes we had to eat green bananas, and that was not fun. And then he would hunt, got a lot of wild boar and
What
fish.
what was that like? With a rifle or a bow and arrow? Or what would you hunt with?
I had a 22 rifle
Mm-hmm.
and a shotgun too.
Had you hunted before you went on the mission field? Okay, so you kind of knew what you were doing there.
Different types of animals, though.
Yeah.
What would you hunt to eat then?
Actually, fishing was the best and most productive. Especially when the season was dry, you could catch fish. And Randy did a lot of that. The oldest son, he loved to do that, so we let him do it. Or we would get the Indians to bring us some fish. Just say, bring us some fish, and they would go get it.
We just pay them a little bit.
Okay.
And they could roast it. You remember that when they roasted they had a little shack that they steamed it, and it was super delicious. We also ate a lot of alligator.
Oh.
Alligator.
So how do you hunt an alligator?
How do you catch one?
Yeah.
Well, it's like fishing for anything else. If you use heavier equipment, heavier line, put a big hunk of meat on the hook, and
Interesting.
put it in a creek usually where you could string the line across the creek to two different points and put the bait right in the middle.
So during your time there in Colombia, do you remember any kind of, well, this podcast is called Crazy Missionary Stories, and we've heard a lot already from you, but does anything jump out to you, maybe like a miracle you saw or just something crazy that happened while you were there?
I'll probably think about one tomorrow.
And you can call me and tell me about it. Did you see any miracles while you were out there?
A miracle. Do you remember any miracles?
Well, that none of us died. Oh, well, there's one. Well, I think I told this story on my podcast, but tell them about when Randy got lost. Do you remember that?
That was a miracle.
Uh-huh.
He was out hunting. He actually would go and visit different missionaries that were located in different areas, and to hunt mostly. He would go down there to help with projects, but he would spend part of his time out hunting, and they didn't mind that because he brought meat back in. So he went out hunting one day with an Indian fellow that knew his way around, and they got deep into the jungle, and for some reason we never could figure out why the Indian fellow left him and went back. So it left him alone. And he searched for 8 days, right? 8
days, yep.
Trying to find his way back to civilization, and I think after about the second day, somebody came to wherever I was, and I can't remember where I was now, and told me that that he was lost. He'd already been lost for several days.
Oh no.
And so I get down there. There's a crowd of people there by this time searching, So so here we're searching teams, and we would cut a straight line. This was jungle. You had to cut your way through, and then start searching and crisscrossing it, to try to cover everything. On the 8th day, in the afternoon, they sent somebody out from the village where he had been where he stayed, and told me that he'd been found, that he found his way back to the village. So that was the end of the 8-day search. That was clearly a miracle that he was able to survive and find his way back on his own.
Wow.
Well, eventually, I think after the 4th day, the tribal people didn't get up to go look for him. And Dad woke them all up, and they said, well, no, we're not going back out there because even we don't last more than 4 days.
Wow.
So that's when you offered him the person who found him a outboard motor.
So Sandy told us a little bit about a cannibalistic tribe that was in the area. Did you ever have any contact with them, the Maku?
Yeah, we finally made a friendly contact with them after we were probably working off and on with them for about 4 years.
Wow.
And I happened to be out there.
They rotated. They stay out 3 months and then rotate somebody else out.
And so we took turns. Everybody took a turn out there, and we just had this big place cleared in the jungle area where they roamed, where they had access to, and we would leave gifts out for them and try to get them to come out and try to make contact with them. This went on, like I say, for years. So I happened to be out there when this happened. I would only go maybe once a month or so. And we had a house out in the middle of a lake nearby for protection, and it was on poles. And about 9 o'clock in the morning, one morning, a group of them came out in the garden, which was about 100 yards from our little house on the lake. And so we go over. We had this all planned, and they're standing over there in the line, right in the edge of the jungle, and so we just kind of spread out, the three of us, and started walking toward them, and we each one of us had a gift that we were offering them, and I had a machete in one hand. That was one of the things that you carried all the time. And this was very tense, high drama. And there's about 4 of them coming out, and the 3 of us are spread out here, and they're walking toward us, and we're holding out this gift here. And so the one in front of me comes up carefully, very carefully, looking at me, and takes this out of my hand and looks at it. And then he points at the machete. That's what he really wanted. And I didn't give it to him, of course. So anyway, this was an icebreaker, and they stayed there then for a couple hours.
They painted you guys with their paint too, remember? We've got pictures of Dad with...
They came with what?
They painted your face.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And Dad has a tattoo. They were trying to get the tattoo off his arm. They didn't quite understand that.
Anyway, this went on for, like I say, about an hour. And that was enough to be at that high level of tension. And anyway, for some reason, they decided to leave. One of the guys said something, and they all began to move out of the jungle and went back out and back to where they were. Now, that was a long time ago. It took a long time to make friends with them, and now they're civilized. And they're living near, I think the government moved them up near a little town right in the jungle, but it's one of the smaller towns there. And they've got their own little village, and
And they have the Bible in their language.
They have the Bible in their own language now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Cool.
Incredible.
So when they were there for that hour, were you able to communicate with them at all? Did you speak the same language?
Well, I kept talking. We would keep saying words and just to break the ice, you know, try to talk as calmly as possible. And no, they couldn't understand a word. We couldn't understand anything. All we could understand was they wanted that machete.
I'm conflicted about this machete.
Can you, if you can imagine trying to survive in the jungle without as much as a machete to help you survive?
Well, we found, they say that they were chewing down stalks of bananas. They used their teeth to get the banana down out of the tree.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
They cut their hair with piranha teeth, you know, and you can tell when you see pictures of them, kind of choppy. Yeah, they had figured out how to survive, but it was rough.
But they didn't have a machete.
No.
Wow. So did they have spears when they came out? What did they have? Yeah.
Bamboo poles, and they had a hardwood point on it. Yeah, one of our, that brings up another story. One of our missionaries got shot with one of these.
Oh, really?
Yep.
And what happened to them?
Well, they put about this much poison on the end of it.
So that's about
There
like
wasn't
2
enough
inches?
in order to do damage, you got to have more than one. If he'd gotten 4 or 5, it would have killed him.
Wow.
Were you out there when he got shot?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Either I was either there or heard it so many times that I feel like I was.
Felt like you were.
But they had the antidote for him.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
There was a shot
yeah.
that they gave him.
We had shots that we carried,
Wow.
and so we gave him that shot right away.
What is the poison made from? What?
It's a poisonous plant that grows in the jungle. That's how they kill game. See if they hit a small game and it's got that poison in it, it'll kill it within, a couple minutes.
Wow.
Takes a while, but they can kill game with those. That's the whole reason for having them. But and they also shoot each other with them if they've got an enemy.
So as a new tribes missionary in the tribal region, you all carried syringes with the antidote.
Well,
Or what did you have?
On the contact they did, but we weren't in danger where we lived. Our people didn't shoot poison darts.
Okay, when you were going into a new region, you did that. That just blows my mind.
Yeah.
well, if we knew quite a bit about all the tribes that were there, and we knew the ones that were dangerous. And if there was any danger of being shot with a poison dart, yeah, we would carry that vaccine. That this Malku tribe had poison darts,
Wow.
and so we knew it from the beginning.
And these darts actually came from that contact. He brought some back,
Okay.
and I thought, someday somebody might want to listen to that story. And so, and this is a piece of bamboo. Contacting that tribe was a miracle too, because they were very, very savage, very primitive. And then didn't you move a few families out there to work with them?
Yeah, we had somebody out there for years, actually, a couple families. Well, I guess they weren't out there all the time. Sometimes we just didn't. They had to leave for one reason or another, and we just didn't have anybody to go. So.
So Sandy told us that she had a pet ocelot when she was younger. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about that?
He was a big pest. You don't want a pet ocelot. They mess on everything.
Oh, no. Well, we're going to start wrapping up here soon. But I'm curious if you have any advice You're 97. I hope it's okay that I say your age.
He's past that. No pride there.
You're 97. You were married for 73 years. That is such an accomplishment, and that's so amazing to me. So a lot of people can learn a lot from you. Do you have any advice for maybe someone who wants to become a missionary, someone who is a missionary, or just in general? I'd love to hear some words of wisdom from you.
As you say that, this line from the old song comes to mind. Only one life, and it'll soon be past. And only what's done for Christ will last. That's all you're going to have when this is over.
I would like to say a couple words about my mom. We had a family celebration on Saturday out at Miramar Beach, and it was like 27 of us, nieces, nephews, and grandkids and great-grandkids. And everybody got up and said something. Jim did the service, and he said, let's just open this up. Whoever wants to say something about Alma, mom, grandma, whatever. And the overwhelming theme about her life was that she was a servant, and she didn't want any recognition. She was there to serve, wouldn't you say, Dad? Serve and just help people be happy, and didn't really want much for herself. She was a hairdresser, so the women would come out of the jungle after being back there for 6 months or so with raggedy hair and her nails all messed up, and she would do their nails and their hair, give them a perm back in the day. In fact, we all did not like the smell of perms. Our house always smelled like a fresh perm. Dad especially complained about that. But that, I think the heart of a servant is really what you need to have if you're going to do real work, especially in another country, because those people see that.
Yeah, the impressive thing about her life was that she showed us what it looked like. And she did it every day. And there in Romans chapter 6, it says, he that's greatest among you, let him become your servant. This is coming from God himself. If you want to be great, in God's eyes, be a servant.
And then she was a great example of that.
Yeah, just incredible to hear, even just before you knew the Lord, she's the one who took you to church.
She was the first missionary in the family. Yeah. But there was a lot of people at her service. We're doing another one on Saturday in Sanford, but there was a lot of people that weren't even Christians there, and they family members or married to a family member, and they acknowledged that too. It's like, she was there to make people happy and just live a life of service. So.
Well, heaven will be quite a celebration.
Yes.
When you get to heaven and you see all these people that you guys have reached out to in tribal areas, and then all the other missionaries that you worked with who have worked around the world in difficult places.
Yeah.
So what an honor to meet you and to hear a bit of your story today. Appreciate it, Mr. Green, you being here with us and sharing
Yes. Thank you so much.
And just the impact of your daughter, one of your children, one of your 5, and
6.
all the things.
6. Yeah.
All that has been taking place in Sandy's life and through her life and ministry.
Mom and Dad came down every year. Well, for the last 10 or 15 years, I was in Nicaragua. They stayed a month, and they would bring all kinds of great things in their suitcase. They brought me a vacuum cleaner once because I had some rugs, and they brought me a vacuum cleaner. And he would bring all of his he's an electrician too, and so he'd bring his tools and fix lights and fix appliances. And I remember in Los Cedros one time, Dad, it was so hot and blaring the sun down. Well, you've been out there, and he would work for a little while, go in and take a shower, take a little nap, and then go back and work a little, and then it just repeated several times a day. So anyway.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I loved hearing your stories and just being able to meet you. I hear a lot about you from Sandy, and Yeah, it's very nice to
I
be
talk a
able to
lot.
meet you in person. I talk a lot. Thank you guys so much for listening to Crazy Missionary Stories. If you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow us and give us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe, and of course, share it with your friends. Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.